we'll have to see, you know, as we get more details. I don't know all the details yet. I haven't looked at it. We'll definitely be covering it on the channel. That's the brief top-down overview of it. So let's go ahead and talk about some weirdness that's definitely going on. This is what gets weird. And this has kind of been, all right. It's hard to like not get political. And I've said this because, and I'm not right or left, but I don't need to validate any of my political opinions with y'all. That's not it. I don't need to do that. You don't need to validate your opinions with me. Let's just basically understand, though, that what we have going on is political integration into cryptocurrency, so it's going to be discussed. One of the things that is very interesting, at least as the United States sits right now, is this kind of broken up opinions based on basically where you live within the United States. It varies wildly right now. And there's been a few states that are very combative towards the current administration. Whether you agree with the administration on one point of view or one of the states is almost irrelevant. What is irrelevant here, especially as it pertains to cryptocurrency, is that the states that are against kind of or going against the grain of what the federal government is doing are the states that are going to probably be better for you from a cryptocurrency regulation standpoint. Case in point would be something like Texas and Florida. And as we can see here, we have a governor race going on, brewing in Texas, and both of the current candidates for at least I believe it's the Republican Party, are essentially touting that they will make Texas a safe citadel for Bitcoin. Let's go ahead and get into it. This one's coming from Fudzilla, which is a fun domain name. And it says, Texas governor candidate Don Huffines, I think, said he is, quote, committed to making Texas the citadel for Bitcoin and has released a plan detailing the effort. Quote, as a leader in innovation, Texas needs to lead the nation in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency adoption, it reads. Quote, not only by acknowledging, supporting, and promoting the industry, but by also using our natural resources and the power of our state to legitimize Bitcoin as a store of value, medium of exchange, and unit of account. Huffines says the state must stop the federal government, case in point, from, quote, discriminating against Bitcoin holders, end quote, and, quote, trying to shut down or limit freedom-loving Texans, yeah, I did get my southern drawl there, investing in Bitcoin, end quote. Not only does the plan call for the declaration making Bitcoin a legal tender, but it calls for establishing the Bitcoin and Cryptocurrency Policy Commission, quote, which will be tasked with identifying the utility of currencies that can be recognized as accepted Texas currency. Now, if anybody is out there that is working on forming this Bitcoin Cryptocurrency and Policy Commission, I would be super interested in sitting in and kind of observing. Let me know, email me. I want to be in on figuring this out. I am in Texas. I will travel. We're good. All right. And then, so essentially, Don Huffines is running against Governor Abbott, if you guys aren't aware. And, this is actually just posted yesterday. So essentially what happened here is that because it's a political race, what you have is like essentially one side says something, the other side says another thing typically, right? But in this case, what you have is basically they're kind of all on the same page. They're just wanting to make sure they have the support of the Bitcoin holders, the Bitcoin miners. This is actually the smartest play you could make for running in Texas right now, because if you guys are not aware, some of the largest mining farms stateside or even just Western Hemisphere side are in Texas themselves. So you have, just a plethora of untapped resources, probably from donors, etc., just within the Bitcoin mining industry. So make sure you guys understand that this is, as being as politically driven, this is definitely financially driven decisions by these political candidates. Don't get it twisted, okay? This isn't necessarily for your freedom, blah, blah, blah. It sounds great on a campaign trail. That's why it's being said like that and presented like that. But you also need to take into account the financial incentives for these political candidates. And definitely don't vote just based on this. Make sure you go ahead and look at the rest of their remaining policy. Last fall, Texas Governor Greg Abbott gathered dozens of cryptocurrency deal makers in Austin where they discussed an idea that on its face seemed almost upside down. Electricity-hungry Bitcoin miners could shore up the state's power grid, a top priority after a deep freeze last winter triggered blackouts that left hundreds dead. Yeah, I mean, sure, all right. I like how it has to be like hundreds dead. But yes, it did suck. It was terrible. Luckily, we were okay. We had a place to go. Well, we had gas, natural gas. The industry's advocates have been making that pitch to the governor for years. The idea is that the miners' computer arrays would demand so much electricity that someone would come along to build more power plants, something Texas badly needs. Not really what they, okay. I think, well, obviously we could get into that. It definitely needs a more robust power grid to a certain extent, but part of that also has to do specifically with, I think, regulation falling through, as far as I understood it, from the manner in which these structures were built, right? So, anyways, I think the power is there. I think actually, like, taking care of it, it's part of the problem. But if the grid starts to go wobbly, as it did when the winter storm Uri froze up power plants in February 2021, miners could quickly shut down to conserve energy for homes and businesses. That would be interesting. So how are you going to compensate? First of all, how are you going to force or regulate miners to shut down? And then how are you going to compensate them? That would probably be a big play here, right? You would... Because if you're going to shut them down, they're going to lose tons of money, especially at the level that these farms are running. So I don't know how you compensate that. But at last October's meeting at the governor's mansion, Abbott made it clear that he was going to count on the miners' assistance when the electricity grid faced colder months ahead. Help me get through the winter, the governor said, according to 4 people who attended the meeting. Getting through the winter may be key to Abbott's political fortunes as he stands for re-election. He faces 2 main opponents in a March 1st Republican primary and a tougher fight in November against Democrat Beto O'Rourke. I don't think that that's a very tough fight. I mean, it'll be like Austin voting for him and nobody else. I'm just saying, like, from somebody that talks to a lot of Texans, I don't think that's a huge fight. And that's nothing against Beto O'Rourke. I don't really actually follow him too much. I don't follow either of the governors enough, probably because unless it pertains to cryptocurrency, I'm not too politically driven, or unless it comes to other freedoms or whatever, right? But I don't know about that. But here, they have some stats. Maybe they'll re-educate me. The grid is one of the governor's fewer weak flanks. The most recent University of Texas, University of Texas is in Austin, but from October, and it's a university, showed that 60% of Texans disapprove of how state leaders have handled the reliability of the grid. And they're talking about specifically the reliability of the grid right after we had a huge winter storm that shut the system down. So kind of makes sense. Quote, I'm just saying this seems very like a very biased poll just from being a local in the area. Quote, there is not, quote, there has to be a really thoughtful approach to bringing gigawatts worth of Bitcoin onto the system, end quote, said Doug Lewin, an energy consultant in Austin. He said regulators need to require miners to shut down during a crisis instead of making it voluntary. This is worrisome a little bit. It shouldn't affect small miners in Texas, really, but that's a little worrisome. Quote, we've got to make sure that if we're getting close to scarcity, people aren't mining Bitcoins anymore. Well, then you have to compensate them, bro. Abbott is embracing an industry that sees itself as a libertarian form. I've already called that out before yesterday on Twitter, of finance free from meddling by banks and governments. Yeah, he gets the idea. He gets the idea. And if y'all are just getting into cryptocurrency and you don't understand where it started with Bitcoin and you don't understand the ties to libertarian ideals and freedom and moving away from banks and governments controlling your currency, then you need to go reread the white papers and you need to re-educate yourself. And then if you don't agree, sell all your crypto, unless you could buy something like Ethereum or XRP. Jokes aside, let's keep going. That support in Texas' cheap electricity and near zero regulation helped spur big companies like Riot Blockchain Incorporated, Singapore-based Bitdeer Group, and the UK's Argo Blockchain PLC to build some of the world's largest Bitcoin miners in the state. Now, one thing that I do think that I don't agree with and I think we should get rid of is allowing Singapore-based companies to build mining farms stateside, because you're not only letting them benefit economically, but you're also allowing them to purchase, in theory, land and property. I don't know how I feel about that one, but I probably have a very biased opinion because I'm a miner in this state. In all, there are 7 big miners and more than 20 smaller ones in Texas, according to the lobbying group Texas Blockchain Council. Abbott and Republican lawmakers have taken some of the most aggressive steps in the U.S. to lure the industry. Last May, Texas became one of the few states to make it easier for businesses to hold crypto assets and use them as collateral for loans. Abbott also created the Work Group on Blockchain Matters, staffed by the industry experts and insiders. Hey, bro, can you allow us to use Binance US, please? Geez, like one of the only states that doesn't, and you're like, come on in, everybody, but you can't use Binance. Come on. Let's get this going. Quote, he sees this huge opportunity, I believe, around the energy sector, end quote, said Christopher Calicott, a managing director at Austin venture capital firm Trammell Venture Partners, who's on Abbott's crypto task force. I don't like venture capitalists in crypto necessarily, but it is what it is. We already talked about that in my Flux interview. You can go rewatch that if you want. Texas is luring miners partially because other places don't want them. Governments from China to Kazakhstan to Iceland have outright banned or limited crypto mining because of their drain on electric grids. Lee Bratcher, president of the Texas Blockchain Council, finds opportunity in these bans. He's met with Abbott several times to promote Bitcoin's mining benefits to the power grid, including at the governor's mansion last fall. Quote, it's really hard, quote, it's really a healthy dynamic that brings tax revenue, brings job creation, and also is a grid strengthening mechanism, end quote, Bratcher said in an interview. Quote, Governor Abbott's been very supportive, end quote, and Abbott isn't alone. State leaders from Austin Mayor Steve Alder on the left to conservative Senator Ted Cruz are pushing Texas as a crypto paradise. A few days before the governor's crypto meeting in Austin, Cruz spoke for 38 minutes at a blockchain industry conference, keying in on the potential for Bitcoin mining to bolster the state's power system. Quote, in 5 years, I expect to see a dramatically different terrain with Bitcoin mining playing a significant role as strengthening and hardening the resiliency of the grid, end quote, he said. Depending on Bitcoin miners is risky because there's a chance that they won't shut down or will take too long to power off, said Ben Hertz Shargel. Is that right? Global head of energy consultant Wood Mackenzie's Grid Edge unit, and I think that's a fair point. As crisis looms, miners could vie for power with power with families and businesses. Quote, at those times, Bitcoin mining would be competing with basic core societal needs like heating or cooling homes or the functioning of hospitals and nursing homes, end quote. Abbott's spokespeople didn't respond to multiple email and phone requests for comment. The governor's embrace of crypto mining goes back years. Gideon Powell, an oil wildcatter in Dallas, recalls pitching crypto to Abbott soon after he got into Bitcoin mining about 5 years ago. And at another meeting a few weeks after last year's storm, the governor quizzed him about how the industry could help stabilize the grid. Quote, he definitely seems to grasp it, end quote, Powell said. Quote, and it's such a weird concept. Hey, we're going to put more energy consumption into an energy system, and that's going to stabilize the grid, end quote. Texas's competitive power market is central to the miner's pitch. Nothing is more important to Bitcoin mining than electricity. It powers the computers that hum nonstop to solve complicated algorithmic equations. This work is the source of all the world's Bitcoins. Within 2 years, enough new Bitcoin mines will come online to require as much as 5 gigawatts of additional electricity in Texas, according to the Texas Blockchain Council. That's enough to light up Austin, a city of almost 1 million, twice over. There's a risk that projections may need to be adjusted. Mining is only profitable when Bitcoin trades above the cost of the power and the computers needed to create them, and prices are off almost 50% from a record high reached in November. An extended slump could delay the mining expansion. For now, and this is true because like we did talk about this, I think when we were talking about preparing for kind of the bear market, etc. And a lot of these companies that have basically taken out loans to pre-order a bunch of Bitcoin miners could find themselves in a position where they end up just going ahead and going under, canceling the loan, not getting any of those parts, and then calling it a day. This is a possibility depending on where we end up with the market. For now, the idea of putting further stress on the grid is anathema to Texans who live through the last year's storm, when frigid weather swept across the state, freezing up gas wells and forcing power plants offline. The blackouts left more than 200 people dead and paralyzed in the state for almost a week. Texans blamed Abbott's lax regulation of the electricity system, and lawmakers ordered hundreds of power plants to winterize. And I remember that was clearly, that's what we were referencing earlier when we were talking about it. Quote, everything that needed to be done to fix the power grid, everything was done. All right, end quote, Abbott said in June. The power grid operator also is optimistic Bitcoin miners can help the grid. A spokesperson for the Electricity Reliability Council of Texas, or ERCOT, said in a statement. But there are signs the risk of blackouts remains. 2 Arctic blasts in January shut down some gas production, exposing continued vulnerabilities for equipment that ensures the flow of fuel to electricity generators. Rivals are hounding Abbott over his handling of the power disaster. Quote, experts continue to warn that Texas could face another grid failure the next time we experience an extreme weather event, end quote, O'Rourke said on his Twitter account in December after the governor promised the lights would stay on this winter. Quote, Abbott and his appointees shouldn't be betting our lives on the weather, end quote. Former state senator Don Huffines, a GOP primary challenger, announced a plan this month to do more than Abbott to stimulate crypto, especially to strengthen the power grid. Quote, I am committed to making Texas the citadel for Bitcoin, end quote, Huffines said in a statement. At the October 13 meeting in Governor's Mansion, Abbott made it clear he's already all in on crypto mining. His blockchain working group is looking for more crypto-friendly laws and incentives to pursue, and the industry's expansion plans to have his support. When someone asked if Texas is Bitcoin country, the governor smiled and agreed. It's God's country. All right, so moral of the story, though, as a whole, is pretty much on the GOP side for Texas, whether you're talking about Huffines, who's running against him in the primary, or Abbott, Bitcoin looks to be healthy in Texas. Obviously, the Binance.us thing needs to be handled, in my humble opinion. But I guess you do have the risk of Beto O'Rourke, who doesn't seem to agree with it. So vote accordingly, depending on how you feel about that issue and if it's your number one issue or if there are other issues that you find more important. So that's really up to you as far as all that goes. But as far as the political influence of cryptocurrency, those are kind of your voting options in Texas. And if you're not in Texas and you want to participate in cryptocurrency, your safe zone appears to be Texas. So come on over. I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Crypto Mining Morning Show every Monday through Friday, 7:45 a.m. Pacific and 10:45 a.m. Eastern Time. You can check out more clips here, or if you're interested in checking out the entire live show, you can check that out down here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Tuesday.